How is it going, everyone? In this video, I want to talk the big update on Final Fantasy XVI. It is nearing the end of development, and that has me very excited. Obviously, this is a game we've been waiting on an update for a little while. I think initially they had planned the game to come out in 2022. I had initially expected that. I was pretty strongly leaning in that direction, that this game was going to come out in 2022. I kind of feel like that's not going to happen, but let's talk about it. So, as noted on Video Games Chronicle, Final Fantasy XVI producer Naoki Yoshida has once again said that the game is near the end of development, as spotted by Twitter user _FF14. An interview with Yoshida can be found in a free magazine. The interview is mainly focused on the Final Fantasy series in general, which is getting a special clothing line, and I believe that's what this is related to. But Yoshida did note, development of the latest title, Final Fantasy XVI, is in its final stages. Final Fantasy XVI aims to integrate the story and the gaming experience into a single-player game unlike Online, which portrays multiple players simultaneously. Final Fantasy XVI focuses on the individual. This makes the story more immersive. It's a very dense story. He also noted, as an adult, I learned about society and said to myself, reality is not as easy as a video game. I hope that those who once left Final Fantasy will remember how exciting their passion for video games was back then. He also noted that he hopes that for the people that once loved Final Fantasy and maybe drifted away from the franchise, that this would be a game that brings them back into the franchise itself. And yeah, I guess you could look at Final Fantasy if you want to look at the mainline entries. I mean, when was the last one that was universally loved? It's been quite a while. Even like one that I absolutely adored in Final Fantasy XII, if you go back to 2006 when that game came out, it was incredibly divisive. Yeah, if you look up the Metacritic score, I believe it's like a low 90 or something like that. Like, yeah, that's really good, but I remember the rhetoric with FF12. A lot of people did not like the game. I believe a lot of that reason was because of the battle system. It was more reminiscent of like an MMO, and that was a little bit jarring for sure. I think everybody loved Final Fantasy X, so if you want to go back to FF10, we're talking 2001, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, it's been quite a while since I would say we got a Final Fantasy game that was universally loved. You can look at like the FF7 remake, and I would say the majority of people really did enjoy that. But outside of that, FF15, a lot of people disliked that. I was incredibly disappointed by the story. I loved FF13, but obviously the rhetoric with that was the game was way too linear, and I hated the subsequent follow-up titles in FF13-2 and Lightning Returns. Hate is a strong word. I wasn't a big fan of them, let's say that. I loved FF13, the original game though, and I'd love that game to get a remaster, and the whole trilogy, to be honest, why not? I'll go back and play 13-2 and Lightning Returns, even though I didn't love those games, but yeah, FF12 again, I personally really enjoyed it as well. So for me, honestly, I liked FF10, I liked FF12, and I liked FF13. I just didn't like FF15, so yeah, but like, I am aware of the fact that the notion has been kind of mixed bag as far as the recent FF games go, and with 13 I can definitely see why. 12, it seems like it's aged really well, and now people looking back on it, people that played the Zodiac Age, they really enjoyed it, so that tone has kind of shifted. 15 is what it is. I think most people enjoyed the combat system, the open world, the visuals, but man, that narrative was like kind of a train wreck, and even the combat, a lot of people didn't dig that, so yeah, FF10, again, I would say most people love that, and then we're going back to FF9 now, so let's not even go that far back into the 90s, but yeah, Final Fantasy 16, I think because Naoki Yoshida is at the helm, he did a phenomenal job with FF14. Given the success of FF14, like, I have a lot of faith in Final Fantasy 16. Maybe that's just completely stupid by me, and we should always be a little bit reserved when it comes to Square Enix, but hey, the FF7 remake was good. FF14 has been killing it. Most, I think, would say it's the best MMO that's out on the market right now. I don't think that's too big of a stretch to say, and with Yoshida at the helm of FF16, I'm excited for it. It is going to be a PlayStation 5 console exclusive. We don't know the lengths of which, you know, timed exclusivity and everything like that. Obviously, Sony and Square Enix worked out a deal for this one, and it looks like with Final Fantasy in general, there's going to be a bit of an exclusivity with the FF7 remake as well. And I know a lot of people are just worried about when they're going to play FF7 Remake Part 2. I know a lot of people are wondering, hey, what's the deal with that? It's been over 2 years since the release of Part 1, does Square Enix have too much cooking in the oven right now? Kingdom Hearts 4, FF7 Remake Part 2, Final Fantasy 16. It's all different teams working on this stuff. You guys gotta remember that. But, yeah, with Square Enix, you know, sometimes they announce a game and we're left waiting a very, very long time. FF16 was revealed. When was it revealed? It was the PlayStation 5 reveal event, right? Back in 2020, I want to say that's when it was. Maybe it was a little bit later than that. I can't remember exactly. The years have been blurring since early 2020, but nonetheless, I'm incredibly excited about the game. The gameplay we've seen thus far has looked tremendous, and I've done some of the... I've looked at the website, and they have some insight on the lore and the details of the story and the world, and I think it looks rather good. I'm really hoping for a quality game. The gameplay looks awesome. It looks like a super stylish action game, which right up my alley, and I think visually it's going to be a stunning game. So hopefully we do see it soon. Like I said at the top, don't think it's going to be 2022, late 2022, just because Forspoken got delayed. If Forspoken still dropped in May, I think it would have made all the sense in the world for fall, for Final Fantasy 16 to be Square Enix's big fall game. However, if you drop Forspoken and Final Fantasy 16 right around the same time as one another, you can do it for sure, but Forspoken is this big new IP that Square Enix is trying to get over. Why are you going to be competing with yourself? That just doesn't make a lot of sense, because Final Fantasy 16 would get the lion's share of the attention. Forspoken is scheduled for an October release, so even if it's like a month later, if FF16 is for November, just a little, I just don't think that's a good idea, and maybe that's because I am like mentally scarred from what EA did with Titanfall 2 and Battlefield 1, and Titanfall 2 just completely collapsed. But nonetheless, I just think for Forspoken's best interest, you want to push FF16 into some period a little bit after. Spring 23, I think, makes a lot of sense. Again, had Forspoken been in May, I would say by all means, if it is near end of development, if this game is wrapping up development and it's ready to go, why not just drop it? But I would say with FF16, let it cook in the oven a little bit more. If you want to get it out, just do it in spring. Or, I mean, I don't throw this option out. Forspoken's a brand new IP that you really want to click. You could delay that into spring of 2023 if Final Fantasy 16 is ready to go and it's at a polished state. I know Forspoken got delayed once already, but that's a game that I think a lot of people think it needs some work from a gameplay standpoint. I just don't know how excited people are, and fall's gonna be a heavy period for new games, so delaying that into spring of 23, just my opinion, I don't think that's the worst idea in the world. If Square Enix is worried about the idea of the games, you know, competing with one another, which that's just something I'm throwing out into the ether, but definitely I've seen that discussion talked about, even in my comment section when talking about FF16 and Forspoken, people were like, yo, why release these games around the same time as one another? You know, you gotta separate them a little bit, but I don't hate the idea. If FF16's ready to go and you want it out this fall, pushing Forspoken isn't a bad idea. But that's going to do it for me. Definitely want to hear from you guys. What's your interest level in Final Fantasy 16? You guys excited for the game? Personally speaking, I think the game looks tremendous. I think the main character looks sick as all hell. So, yeah, hopefully this one does turn out well. Sound off in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.